Alrighty, so today's video is going to be a little different. What I'm hoping to do is show you guys a bit of the behind the scenes of how I write. If you've been following the channel at all, you know that I've written books. I've written Online as It Is in Heaven. We probably won't switch that around just because it's not fun. But how do I write? I certainly don't just sit down and then just like free associate my way into like chapters worth of content and stuff like that. I do a lot of research, and hence the books behind me, but maybe that's never been apparent. So the first thing I want to show you is my library. So in my office, I've got these nice big oak bookshelves, and I have two things. Maybe we'll turn the camera. Yeah, okay, so here's my power tools for my day job. But this is my library. The top shelf, so right here, these are books that I have actually read and processed into my commonplace system. I'm going to show you about that system in a bit, but these are the books that I've read and processed into the system so far. Now, I've read a ton of these other books, either through college or through audiobooks or other things like that. But these are the books that are actually in my commonplace system, which I have research about, which is what I use to write my books. They are in alphabetical order. So these books are in alphabetical order as with author name, and starting with books that I have not read yet are in alphabetical order as well. Now you can see that we're starting on C with Tony Campolo. I haven't quite got to him, though I have read all those books. All my B's are currently in my TBR. So everything from Barna to Beacon Smalley. I'm working through the B's this year for the most part. What I do with these books is when I read them, once they're read and processed, I put a little red dot on each of the books. Now that means that I have read the book and that it is processed. A book doesn't get this dot until it has been read and processed. Right now, the only books I have to process are these guys down here, last kind of 5 that I've read, and we're going to use Marshall McLuhan's Understanding Media, which I finished on our recent staff retreat, as an example as well. I also have my writing composition and writing craft books. These ones have to be processed as well, but they're more for my pen name, so really don't talk about it. The other side of my library is my reference, and most of this is just biblical commentaries, dictionaries, word study guides, all that kind of stuff, you know, Strong's Concordance, you know, various other kind of Bibles and Bible study tools because I write theological books. And then this tiny small section here are books that either are related to or that I've been given to read because of my work at the church. So that explains my library, my organizational system. We're going to talk now about how the sausage is made, how I do my research. So first things first is I read the book. And so when you're reading a book, we'll see if we can do this. When you're reading a book like McLuhan, can I zoom out? No, it won't let me zoom out, guys. When you're reading a book like McLuhan, what I do for each of the sections is I read with a highlighter. I don't like using pen because you can miss stuff. I like using a nice bright yellow highlighter for whenever I'm reading. And so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Nothing too fancy. We're not, you know, making these pretty books like some of the journaling. We're not doing any real extensive marginalia, which is writing in the margins, though I do appreciate finding that whenever I do. So I highlight the page and I dog ear the right-hand side of the spread. For those of you who know a thing or two about publishing, the right-hand side, this is called a spread in a book, and this is the right-hand side of that spread. And I dog ear at the top, which is kind of annoying, where if you see, that's where the page numbers are. A great example will be on this page. That's where the page numbers are. So it's kind of annoying when you're doing that because you end up covering the page number and have to do a lot of this while you're doing the archiving process. I like it when a page number is on the bottom right there, but that's what I do is I highlight the page, and this way, and the reason I do that is because this way you don't miss something that trails onto another page. You dog ear the next page of wherever the quote is, and that's the kind of methodology. So even if a quote starts here, I'm going to dog ear the next opposing page, because what it's going to tell me is that By doing that, I'm going to see that the highlighting goes to the first word and go to the next page, and I'm not going to miss anything. If you dog-ear the other side, you can do this, but if there's ever like a blank page, then it ends up kind of messing it up. And I know it sounds real granular and dumb, but that's how I read. And this is how I tell people that they should be reading and studying, is if you're going to take notes from a book, even if you're writing notes and whatnot, dog-ear your pages and dog-ear them on the right-hand side of the spread, so that all your dog ears are on the same side, and that way you capture everything that could possibly be on these 2 pages. And every time I highlight something, I dog ear to let myself know that this spread has notes that I have to check, and that goes throughout the entire book. What I then do is I take each one of those highlights like this, and I type them. I type them into a Microsoft Word document, and we're just going to get my mouse over here like this, and I type them 1 entry per page on a custom document that has been formatted for 4 inches by 6 inches here. So 6 inches this way, 4 inches this way, and that matches a pretty standard 4x6 note card. The reason I do this and how I do this is I don't just type them in, though I can just type them in. The reason I do it this way is I can use MS Word. I believe you have the same functionality in Google Docs if you need to, is I actually dictate what the highlights say and then add a notation, and I'll try and show you on the bottom here, about which book it's from. This quote, the first top one here, obviously is from Understanding Media by Marshall McLuhan, and it's from page 4, which corresponds to the book, which is in my library. And of course I can't turn the page fast enough. Of Understanding Media by Marshall McLuhan, page 4. So this and that say the same thing, and that's important because this is going to go somewhere different than the book, and the note cards that come from this are also going to go somewhere different, so that you have multiple ways to get to the same information. Okay, so we have book, we have digital file, and then we eventually end up putting them onto note cards like this. And you can see there's a ton of note cards from a book like Marshall McLuhan. And that corresponds to the ton of dog ears that I've taken from this book. This is the evidence of a good book. If you're searching for used books and you see this, it's a good book. It has a lot of information. The original reader who did this to a book saw that book. And that's one of the values of doing this. People get overly sentimental about books, and they think that something as simple as this, a dog ear, ruins a book, and it doesn't. This actually makes it better. This tells me that there's something of value either on this page or this page. Depends if they know about the right-hand secret thing. This tells me that there's something of value here that is important, and that is a great thing to find. If I find a book like this, I immediately pick it up and see what the guy was thinking about, check your highlights, all that kind of stuff. Don't over sacralize. Don't make these things sacred. They are tools. What McLuhan made in this book and what its publishers made in the reprints of this book was meant to be consumed. This is a consumable product. It's meant to be read. It's meant to be underlined. It's meant to be taken apart. It is not a magical token. It has a lot of power behind it, like all good ideas do, but there's nothing sacred about this book, and it shouldn't be treated as such. Dog ear your pages, make notes, interact with the text. That's what good research is when you're writing. So when you take that, so you take your quotes and your sections and your notes that are written in this book, and you put them into your MS Word document. What you then do is you print this. Now, after saying it into the dictation software, I feel comfortable using that as opposed to writing, because it gets me to interact with the words that McLuhan was putting down and the ideas that McLuhan was putting down. It gets me to interact with them in a way that is different than just reading. Reading is important, but writing or reciting, I think, are just as important in order to digest what you're saying. Hearing someone else's thoughts come through your mind is key to being able to understand those thoughts, or rather hearing someone else's thoughts through your voice is key to understanding that. It's all based on repetition. How many times are you interacting with the material? So we have book, we have document that you have spoken into or written into, then you're going to print them. You're going to print them onto these cards. Now I use a fairly inexpensive and cheap HP DeskJet printer. The reason I do this is because this can be set to to print 4x6 note cards. I don't think it can go smaller, but it does do 4x6. And so what I do is I've created the MS Word document that allows me to print those, and I know which orientation that the cards are supposed to go to, and it allows me to print them. So I have a hard copy of these as well as a digital copy. It takes forever for these to print, which is kind of nice. It allows you to kind of have it in the background, but when you get to it and you're, you know, processing this many cards, after saying all of this into that and then printing all this, that's about a 2-hour investment. So when you're doing hard research and it's part of your lifestyle as a writer, this takes a lot of time to be 4 or 5 books behind, and some of these aren't too bad. Habits from the Heart here, I have like a handful of notes from one section. I really didn't get a whole lot out of this book, but there was a really good section, so I have that. But you know, this is going to take about 10 minutes to read in and about another 10 minutes, 20 minutes to print. I'm not going to go too crazy on that. But good books, especially books with a lot of stuff in it, that can take a sizable amount of time. So you want to take the time, like I've done today. I have the whole day booked off just to sit in my office and take care of this kind of, you know, bookkeeping type stuff that makes up the back end of a writer's life. So it takes time to do this, but there is value, because now what you have, not only do you have you read the book and then you own the book, and the book is easy to find in your alphabetic library. What you have then is a physical copy that you can access, which you're going to sort into a commonplace system like this. This is my commonplace system. I'd like a bigger box. Ryan Holiday seems to have all the remaining Trapper Keeper, I can't remember what they're called, but they're like a full-size box, roughly this big, with a nice handle on it and stuff like that. And they no longer make them in production. I'm trying to find an alternative, but these, who are these, Sterilite? Yeah, these Sterilite containers are just about perfect. 4x6 note cards fit sideways in them, and the tabbed dividers fit without having to like crunch the lid down. This commonplace system is just note cards set in alphabetical order. You can see it like in the theology tab, I have A through Z, and anything I read that fits into a theology theme, which several of these cards from Marshall McLuhan are going to, that gets put into the M tab right there in alphabetical order of the M's, with all the rest of the Marshall McLuhan theology-themed notes that I've taken out of the book. Okay, so that allows you to have an offline, easy-to-navigate way to find your stuff that gets you away from the distractions of the internet, that gets you away from the constant research that you can do on Google, or the goofing off that you can do on YouTube, or just the dead time that you can spend listening to podcasts. You take these boxes and that book and your laptop with no internet access somewhere, and you're able to kind of process information, work with your own ideas, and be able to kind of process the stuff. This is important because it's good to have as like a fail-safe. But the problem is that it's really hard to search, and this is where my particular system comes in, because these commonplace books or commonplace systems have been around forever. This is basically just analog note taking on note cards. It's a simple system. Anyone could learn how to do that. But the problem is, if you don't know what's in there, then you have to search each one of those tabs for everything. Now you can start with a name like Marshall McLuhan or Malcolm Gladwell or Billy Graham, and you could go to Marshall McLuhan or Malcolm Gladwell, or you can go to Graham, wherever G is here, and you can find if there's anything in each of your categories, and I have 6, that comes from that author, but you kind of have to know the idea first. What I do instead is I work in Trello. This is a free service that you can get online. It's through the company Atlassian. And my commonplace books that I keep have a section to be able to, capture all this stuff. So I have unsorted notes where I can just put like random ideas that come to me that I don't know where they're going to live. I have a place where I keep articles, similarly to how I keep my my books. I want to have copies of these places, so I not only keep the link, but I also keep a copy of the article in there. And then we have our sections. Now these are the sections of my commonplace book here. So I have theology, technology, sex, parenting, and marriage, strategy, writing, and miscellaneous. And that's the 6 categories that I have here: theology, technology, sex, parenting, marriage, miscellaneous, strategy, and writing. And what those do is basically encompass most of the books that I'm going to read or have read. They fit into one of those categories. I mean, the MISC can kind of catch a lot, but they fit into most of those categories so that I know where the information that I'm taking out of these books ends up. It ends up in one of those categories, and every year, you can see that I have a Commonplace 2023. Every year I make another one of these so that I know, hey, I read that book in 2022. It had this idea, but I'm not really 100% sure on it. If I have to, I can find it here or here. But what I can do on Trello, which is the amazing part, is you can search for things. And so what I'm going to search for here, and why I think Trello is the real superpower here, is I can search, and we are going to enter the term pseudo-student. See this? Pseudo-student? We're going to enter that in. pseudo-student. This brings up the card, and so now you only have to have a rough memory of what this is. And what you can do with this is enter in broad themes like baptism. Right? And now you get all these cards that deal with baptism, and you can see if they're in your commonplace or not. So what we have with this complete system is a way to take, and we'll get the book down here for everything. We have a way to properly take the information from books that you're doing research that you're going to use for justifications and explanations on your own writing. You have a way to take it, digitize it, hard copy it for longevity, but also make it searchable for practicality, because we're going to write on computers. That's how most people write. Neil Gaiman writes novels off of pen and paper and stuff like that, but most people are going to write off computers, and that's something that I do at my home desk. I do it here as well, and in my office I've set it up as a writer's office for the most part. I've set it up so that this system can kind of just flow in the background. And I try to keep it to where, if I get to 10 books here, I know I'm behind the 8 ball. If I get to 10 books here, I know that what I'm not doing is keeping the saw sharp, and my information, which I've got in a couple places, I'm not keeping that well full. So it's a process that does take time and does take investment. If you're going to be a writer, especially a nonfiction writer, and you want to read a lot of books and get the most out of these books, then having this system is important, and it has to be part of your daily kind of rhythm. For me, most of the time, that just means making sure that you're taking notes in the books you're reading, and also not putting up with books that you're not getting the most out of. So this is The Drama of Scripture, which is a fine book about, where we find our place in the biblical story. It literally is about what its subtitle is, and the author does a great job of it. But as you can see, he lost me somewhere close to the halfway point, where it was just this is just a book that isn't really getting anywhere. And I have some notes, but not a whole lot. I'm not getting a lot out of the book, so this got dropped because it no longer was getting me what I was looking for while I was doing my research. You have other books, like The Power of Place, and I don't know if you can see it here, where there's, it kept my attention, but that big section in the middle, there was nothing really of value that I could use for my writing in my 6 categories that really caught me. So I liked the book, I finished the whole book, but I only kept, or I only make note of the things that I'm actively researching on. This is a book that was recommended to us by our church as our employer and stuff like that, and is a fantastic book, but obviously I'm only going to get certain things out of that. So whereas McLuhan, because I write about tech and the church and how it's interacting with our lives, and that's basically what he wrote about, has a whole lot more. So you can give up on books. You can stop reading books that aren't engaging you the way you need to, and you can also enjoy books that are enjoyable. There's books in this section, like actually basically all of Tim Ferriss's books. These 4 right here, I have like 4 notes from Tim Ferriss, but I love reading his books. He doesn't really apply to me, but I like his research methods and how he approaches problems, but none of them really apply to the problems I have. So some of these are gifts, some of them I've seen cheap at like garage sales and stuff like that. I think I picked the 4-Hour Workweek up for $1, which was, pretty awesome. But yeah, so that's how my reading happens. That's how my research happens, my recording of the research, and from that I'm able to take ideas and quotes and whatnot and turn them into writing. And what I mean by that, and I'll go to one of my other commonplace books here. One sec. Where are we here? Yeah, Commonplace 2022. So I have unsorted notes that I've kind of put through. But then we get into, and I'm trying to find a good example here. These are all my different categories from last year. Some of them have gone together. But what I do with these is if I have an idea, it also goes into these categories if I'm thinking about writing. And eventually you get enough of these kind of random ideas or categorized ideas that you're able to turn them into a book. That's actually one of the main parts of this system. Is the first section in any of these things is a miscellaneous section where my own thoughts come to. So it's not just that, it's not just that there's authors' works represented, and there is a majority of authors' works, but my own thoughts end up here as well, and end up there as well, so I can search them. So when I'm looking for a broad topic, let's say on theology or internet or anything, I can use those keywords to search, and I can also come here and do a physical search of these things, and find those topics to be able to kind of move from there for how I'm going to write. And all this is really just fodder for how a writer works. If you're not consuming decent amounts of information like this, and if you're not processing information like this in a way that's meaningful and in a way that sticks in your brain, then really you're just writing from inspiration. And that's a really rough place to try and write meaningful work from, because unless it's a massive amount of inspiration, one of a kind type stuff, then you can't really go anywhere from there. So that's my process. I hope that let's see, turn this back. That's my process. I hope that kind of shows you how the sausage is made, and gives you an idea about what I'm up to when I'm doing my writing and how I process things. It is a process that's been gleaned together from a couple other people, namely Ryan Holiday and Scott P. Schepner. I think that's how you say his name on Twitter. He talks about more a formalized system of this commonplace record keeping called Zettelkasten, which I definitely think you should check out if you're into this stuff. But I really do recommend to start thinking about this if you're into writing and you want to start putting the pieces of a process in place so that you can start writing in a more formal setting, even if it's just monthly blog posts that you want to kind of put up. This kind of system has 10x'd my productivity. It allows me to do way more, and I know I don't publish that much, but allows me to get way more stuff kind of like into my life as far as ideas and research, so that I can make changes in my own behavior, so I can make changes in my own application of this kind of stuff, whereas before it was just me having good ideas and trying to write. And so this is how I'm going to be processing my future books, and this is it's an option for other people to try. So that's just me and my system, and I hope you guys had a great day. Take care.